Josh Pate with us. Josh, what's up, buddy?
I'm in a strange spot in my life. I think a lot of people, maybe not necessarily in College Station, but where I'm from, Nashville, or where I'm at, you're in a situation where you could see spring practice around the corner, but you also know the forecast says snow in the next 24 to 48 hours. You really don't know where you are on the calendar right now. And yeah, I'm working my way through it, David, as best I can, but I need this conversation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know if Nick's got enough time to pull up the video from yesterday, but A&M football has got these conditioning videos that they've been posting, and it just got me kind of charged up because I'm watching some new faces. I'm watching some existing faces. I'm seeing Tommy Moffitt get the group going, and here we go. Here's the video. I don't know if you can see it on your end, Josh, but it just got me like, all right, it's time to work.
Yeah, yeah. You know, when we were there for the Missouri game last year, by the way, just a little side note, we were there for the Missouri game. I go in the weight room, so Tommy Moffitt's in there, and Tommy Moffitt's done this, it feels like, for 100 years, and he talked about the situation Elko's put him in. He talked about the situation he's in at Texas A&M, and this is a guy that's been around the block. He said, I think I probably like the spot I'm in right at this moment in time better than at any point in my career, which was it was not a shocking thing to hear someone say, but it was something that made me go, really? Because you just figure a guy that's got that much length on his resume had better days somewhere, but maybe your best days are these days.
Yeah, it's man, I think that his style, like it can't happen overnight, right? And I think we saw some major strides from a conditioning standpoint for A&M. But I'm just in my head thinking, like, old school football wise, what it looks like in 2 to 3 years once he's had a full cycle with these guys.
Yeah, I think so. Also, you always pair strength and conditioning and nutrition and sports science, psychology, all of the off the field, quote unquote, aspects of a program. They're all connected like train cars to the engine of a head coach's philosophy and vision. So Elko's philosophy and vision is that which you just described. It's therefore the beauty, but also the struggle in that is it's not that. It's not a quick fix. It's not you should automatically expect like what Cignetti just did at Indiana. Not that he's quick fixing and taking shortcuts, but it happened immediately for him his first year there. With Elko, if you believe in what he sells, which I do, if you believe in his vision, which I do, you also have to believe that year one we'll kind of start to get an inkling of it. Year two, we'll start to see it set in, but probably like year three, that's when we'll look at it and we'll say, there is no remnant of anything from the past. Everything about this is the full thumbprint of Mike Elko. It does take a while, though. Anything worthwhile in this sport or in life does. So in the aggregate, it can be kind of frustrating. That's why when people ask, they'll do it this year just like they did last year. What is an acceptable record for so-and-so? What's an acceptable record for Texas A&M? I could give you a number, 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, whatever. I can give you what my expectation is, but you know as well as I do, because we have talked about this on this program before. It's, do I look at you by November and say, first off, this feels even better than what I saw in September a couple of months ago, but also it feels markedly different than what I saw the previous year. Because at that point, David, I could lose a couple of 3-point games or win a couple of 3-point games, and my record swings from 8 wins to 10 wins. It really is so inconsequential to where the program is, even though you ultimately get judged on wins and losses. So I always struggle with that whole concept of what's an acceptable win-loss record. Like, I don't know because I haven't seen the team play yet.
So I got a weird question. I want to get to the Ross Dellinger stuff, but under last year's playoff model and this year's playoff model, if you are a middle tier-ish team, okay, does it make more sense? When I say middle-ish tier, I'm saying a team that it doesn't have the greatest NIL, but you're competitive. Does it make more sense to be in the Big 12 or the ACC, considering, like Indiana had a nice schedule in the Big 10, but if they were Arizona State, for instance, they're not doing that, I don't think, in the SEC or the Big 10. So if you're one of these middle-tier teams that is not Ohio State, not Alabama, not some of these bigger, does it make more sense to get to the college football playoffs by being under the old system, or the current system, not the one we'll probably see in 26?
So it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to make the playoff, then yeah, 110%. It makes more sense to be in a G5 league than it does the SEC or the Big Ten, if that's your goal. Now, you'll never convince me that those teams have a chance to win a national championship, which goes back to we could go 5 segments on this, but my whole rub with this concept of what is success, because I am not a college basketball guy when it comes to college football. College basketball, there's this understanding. There are a bunch of teams out there that probably can't win a national title, but we celebrate that they made the tournament, which is great. I love college basketball. I don't want it touching college football. I don't celebrate someone making the tournament as if to say, all right, they made the tournament. Now, whatever else happens, but they made it. It's done. That's not how I felt about Arizona State. That's not how I felt about SMU. You make this thing. I ought to believe that you could win the thing. You can't. Arizona State couldn't win it. Even if they took Texas to overtime, Josh, they had 2 more games to win even after that. SMU ditto. So if you want to win the whole thing, you better be resourced like the other big boys are. So like Missouri doesn't match Georgia or Alabama historically, but they still get the same revenue cut of that TV money that Georgia gets and that Alabama gets, and that gets reinvested back in the program. And that's how hopefully you build yourself to where you can compete. Those other teams, in their best of worlds, are not going to be able to compete 3 or 4 times against those that do have it.
All right, and then I go to the perception of it, though, right? So a perception of A&M is, 8-4, right? That's the perception of who they are. You got TCU, you got Arizona State, all these other schools that have had that year that kind of, look what TCU's done and A&M's never been able to do it. And I guess they're under the current model, not the future model, there is that quote unquote bragging rights, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's, how can I politically correctly say this? If I am in an advanced class and I am making C pluses to B minuses, and you're in a remedial class and you're making an A minus, and popping some B's on me, but occasionally an A minus, we could either look at the paper blindly and say David's grades are better than mine, or we can bring context into the room and understand, however, if I were in the class you're in, brother, I'd probably be matching or exceeding what you're doing. And the intellectually dishonest part of this sport is everybody knows what we just said. Everybody kind of gets that's the dynamic. But if you're trying to argue against A&M, you're trying to argue for the TCUs or the little guy, whatever you want to call them, it's almost like you bend the truth because you're able to, because you're technically able to say so-and-so's had a better record than so-and-so over the past 4 years. And you're sitting there full well knowing what the rest of the story is. But you also know, I don't have to tell the rest of the story, though. I can plausibly get away with saying this. So, and I also think, David, what you're talking about is probably rear view a lot more than windshield. It's a lot more what the past was like instead of what the future will be like.
So speaking of the future, I was listening to one of your clips, and I think if I heard this correctly, you didn't like the idea of expanding the playoffs, correct? But you were willing to like more this potential model we see in 26. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. So I'm glad you did that because, oh man, everybody else I've talked to refused to. So rewind. I never wanted it expanded. I've never been a playoff guy. I love the regular season. I love the focus that's on it. No matter what kind of argument you make to me, you will never convince me that restructuring the postseason hasn't taken something away from the regular season. Hasn't taken everything away. Still a great regular season. But what I've said is, since I didn't get my way, and since we have expanded the playoff, given where we are now, knowing we can't go backwards, I think I may like the model they're pitching more than I like the current model. That's not to say I love the current model or the future model, but in an A-B scenario, I think the guaranteed auto bid structure, because of the pluses that it gives in terms of focusing on conference, beefing up the out-of-conference schedule because people aren't scared that their win-loss record will be a detractor to making the playoff, I think I may like this model they're floating around a little bit more.
So I'm going to follow that up with a bowl question, and then I'll get back to the playoffs. I miss the old bowl pageantry, right? Like what we have now, there's just games that I watch, when I care. When there's a program that I'll watch it, but it's not the same kind of thing. Do you have an idea? Because I've thrown out some terrible ideas on the show, and every once in a while I bring them back. Like maybe make the bowl season like this bowl's like the first week of 0 week. Make that bowl season. Maybe make the spring game like the bowl. I don't know. I've thrown out some horrendous ideas. Do you have any ideas of how we can keep some of the bowls, maybe not all 277 of them, but some of them, and still have just I don't know, like just the pageantry that we're used to?
I don't know that there's any going back on that. We still have the bowls now. That's not like they don't exist. The spirit of bowl season, I think, is taking a pretty big hit. What frustrates me a lot about that is this crowd that comes in. If you'll notice this, because I feel like you do. If you'll notice, though, there's this crowd that's always really quick to say, well, they were always meaningless bowl games, as if they're speaking for everyone. Well, you're not speaking for me. They were never meaningless to me. I can go back to the random like 1997 Citrus Bowl or 2003 Outback Bowl or whatever. Watch the level of play. Watch the intensity on the field. It's no different than a regular season game. Guys are all in, facing the fan, over the cliff, and it's because of a very delicate structure we had in college football. You never signed pen to paper on your scholarship and promised that you were going to take bowl season seriously. Okay, there was never something baked into your DNA, like your skin color or your eye color or how tall you're going to be, that guaranteed you would take bowl season seriously if you were ever a college football player. It was understood. Just like it's understood in society, we take certain things seriously, even though legally you don't have to. You took bowl season seriously. Okay, so then it's only a recent concept, kids. For those of you who are very young watching the show, it's only very recent that the phrase meaningless game or meaningless bowl game even came around. And it perfectly overlaps and coincides with playoff culture and anything not having to do with the playoff being lesser than or being meaningless. But because we got there, David, I don't know that you can go back. I've heard the week one theory that you've talked about. I think there may be some merit to that of if we want to save the thing and we're still saying that we take the regular season seriously, maybe you loop it around to the front of next year. That's your kickoff weekend. It's not perfect, but again, perfection would be going back in time, and we know we can't do that.
Yeah, that's good thoughts here. Josh Pate on TexAgs Live. All right, Josh, I saw your rankings for SEC teams 1 through 10. A&M looks to be a little bit out of the middle of the pack. When you do these rankings, you're not just talking about the last season, right? You're talking about recent history and projections, correct?
Yeah, and it's program ranking. So it really has nothing to do with team, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what I expect for the upcoming year. This would be a little fun exercise, by the way. A program, the way I define it, the way I would rank them is I want a 4-year snapshot, a rolling 4-year snapshot, and I'm judging win-loss record, so on-field results. I'm judging talent acquisition, disproportionately leaning into recruiting, paying attention to the portal as well. I'm judging your resource pool, and I'm judging program stability. So obviously A&M has been average in the record portion, been pretty good in talent acquisition. The program stability, you've had a major coaching change there. Resource pool's undeniable. So there's some good there. There's some not so good there. I think I had him 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm looking at it after them, Missouri, South Carolina, and the Florida Gators. And then Florida, they're an interesting program. And if I brought this up before, I don't think I have with you. The way we look at DJ Lagway, and by the way, I get it. The dude he's special, right? And especially the way Florida ended the season gave everybody some optimism. I look at his numbers and I see Marcel Reed's numbers that are the same or better in certain areas. Why do you think Marcel, is it maybe the way the A&M season ended? Why do you think Marcel is, I don't know if slept on is the right way, but like people are still like, they're still undecided about him as a quarterback?
Well, they're doing you a huge favor when they do sleep on him, I would firstly say. Secondly, yes, a ton of it has to do with the way the season ended. You have very, very much a recency bias in your mind. This is why people take bowl outcomes way too seriously. They'll talk about bowl momentum, and it's really not even a thing. But it's the last thing that people saw, so they remember it. With Marcel Reed, had he and A&M ended the season red hot, had he had a couple of wins, like Lagway in Florida, they beat Ole Miss. If if A&M were to have beaten Texas late in the year, that's all people would be talking about. He wouldn't really be that different of a player, scenario A to scenario B, but they'd remember him differently. And also with Lagway, I think in people's subconscious, they think, here's what I've seen of him so far. And also they have the idea of what his ceiling is in their mind. Most people define Lagway's ceiling as far above and beyond that of which they would define Marcel Reed.
Yep.
So you what you're talking about is an accurate portrayal of this picture, and that will last throughout the entire spring and summer.
When you watch teams play, like as an A&M insider, I remember that one play from that game. My God, if they just tackle North Sellers on that third play of the game, that vibe feels completely different. If they can score on one of the 4th and 1s against Texas, man, that's a different game. You got a chance to win it at the very end. When you look at teams as an insider for the entire conference and all of college football, do you think about those almost plays? All teams have almost plays, but do you think about that at all when you kind of look at how close the team might be?
Yeah, I think about it. That's the human in me. That's why you have to ignore that. If you're going to accurately judge or have an accurate sort of feel for the country, and then a conference, and then a bunch of teams comparatively, you can't have a Sports Center highlight reel running in your head. That's not football. But yet that's the way most people view sports and football, is through highlight, through memories. I snap my fingers. I say the name of a player or a team. You don't think in terms of all 22 cut-ups, all 64 plays of a game. You think 2 or 3 plays, which is fine, but you better have something that's very indiscriminate. You algorithmically, model-wise, you better have things at your disposal that do not get caught up in that. Because if you don't, you find out why Vegas wins 95, 96% of the time. And you find out why preview magazines get thrown in the fireplace by week 2 every year. And you find out why predictions go up in flames by halftime of week 1 every year. Number one, the sport's already almost impossible to predict. But number 2, it's hard to even have a good feel on a team if you're thinking in those terms. Because here's what I go back to. The whole "you are what your record says you are" thing. It's totally fair to judge teams based on their win-loss record. But the perception of teams can be wildly off. Whether Nuno University and Pate State over here, whether you win a couple of 3-point games and I lose a couple of 3-point games, that's a huge difference. And you make the playoff and I'm over here at a bowl game that fractional people are watching. We may be the same caliber team predictively. Like if we were to play next week, we may be the same caliber team. So it kind of all depends on what you care about. And if all you care about is record, then all you need is record. But if you want to care about record, but also throw some other things in the blender, you can't afford to be thinking in highlight culture. And also, if we're talking about last year and we're trying to think about how this year could be, there are 47 other variables that enter the equation, new players, not the least of which, that just make it impossible if that's the way you think.
Josh, let's close out with this. We talked about Ross Dellinger's report. I don't remember reading about what maybe the portal looks like in that college football world. Any thoughts on what it could look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of this new world. So anyone who's not familiar with what you're talking about, we don't have time to summarize it. I would strongly encourage you, go read Ross Dellinger's reporting over the last several weeks, because you need to read all the stories. Because he talked about a new playoff structure coming up. He talked about the Big Ten and the SEC having control of the thing for 2026 and beyond. David, the other day, he also put out a really, really lengthy, good read on how there's probably a new governance model. If they get the House ruling settlement that they want, a new governance model where they take things and matters into their own hands, they actually have solid teeth on their enforcement arm, solid rule structure. And what I think the portal looks like is contingent upon that. What I think the portal looks like is one window. There's significant penalty for tampering, which doesn't exist right now in word only. And I think a lot of it has to be viewed in a very, very broad scope. It's not all going to be included in one story. It's impossible to do it, but it's all in one kind of futuristic world. And I believe they are banking on being able to control that world from all aspects: enforcement, rule structure, NIL, portal, the postseason format. They want to control that all. The question right now, and no one knows the answer to it, is will they have it?
Josh, great stuff, man. Thank you very much, and thanks to Academy Sports and Outdoors.
I appreciate it.